Today, the 3rd of May, is celebrated as World Press Freedom Day, a reminder to governments on the need to respect their commitment to press freedom. It is also a day of reflection among media professionals about issues of press freedom and professional ethics. Well, Arise correspondent Benny Ack tells us more.
World Press Freedom Day was proclaimed by the UN General Assembly in December 1993, following the recommendation of UNESCO's General Conference. This was a follow-up to the 1991 Windhoek Declaration for the Development of a Free, Independent and Pluralistic Press, arising from Namibia's newfound freedom, the slow unraveling of apartheid in South Africa, and the growing resistance to African dictatorships and the autocratic regimes.
Looking at the essence of the entire celebration, basically we are looking at the fundamental principles of press freedom. We are looking at the state of press freedom across the world, evaluating press freedom across the world. It's also an opportunity for us to rise in defense of attacks, against the media. And it's also an opportunity for us to pay tribute to a number of our colleagues that have lost their lives in the course of their practice.
This year's World Press Freedom Day has as its theme, Journalism under Digital Siege. It spotlights the multiple ways in which journalism is endangered by surveillance and digitally mediated attacks on journalists and the consequences of all these on public trust and in digital communications.
The technologies that were created to monitor cyberspace criminals and terrorists are now being used to monitor journalism professions. One of the core values, one of the core ethics of journalism profession is that any information given to you in confidence must not be disclosed even at the point of death. But with the new technology that the government is deploying, they can expose your sources. They can expose your source of information. And they can also expose what you are discussing with your sources and others.
In recent years, press freedom has come under siege globally as authoritarianism gains strength. Independent journalists increasingly face draconian legal restrictions and threats to their liberty and safety.
If you look at the UNESCO report that was released recently, UNESCO's report indicates that 88% of the world populations agree that there's fast declining of press freedoms around the world. And if you also look at that, the same report also indicates that between 2016 and 2021, about 445 journalists have been killed around the world. And that shows that there is journalism or press freedoms around the world is under severe attack.
In order to credibly and effectively promote press freedom around the world, there are certain expectations from democratic governments. It is expected that policies are consistent with domestic and international laws and principles protecting media freedom, as well as the rights to expression, information, and opinion. Benny Ark, Arise News.
Thanks, Benny. Well, press freedom under democracy. How far and how well? We have President International Press Institute, Nigeria, Musikilu, Mojeed, and President Nigeria Union of Journalists, Chris Isiguzo, joining us in our studio to look at this issue. Thank you so much, gentlemen, both of you, for joining us on Newsnight tonight. Well, let me quote what the Nigerian Guild of Editors has said. Media under attack in Nigeria, democracy in danger. And that's, of course, according to Guild of Editors. How bad really is it, for the press in Nigeria? My question is to Isiguzo, especially when you consider that between 1999 and 2022, 12 journalists have been killed in Nigeria. 300 journalists, violated in one way or another. How bad is it in Nigeria?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, we must look at the World Press Freedom Index. In 2021, Nigeria ranked 120 out of 179 countries. Between 2021 and 2022, we are ranking 129 out of 179. That is a decline by 9 points, which means instead of improving on press freedom, we are declining, and that is a huge challenge. Going away from the statistics you have reeled out, this is a global index. It simply means we are not doing well. Looking at the peculiar environment where we operate, and of course the challenges that stare us in the face every day, it simply means that we are not doing well. This year, we are discussing journalism under digital siege. If you look at this critically, you will now see that every day the journalist is finding it difficult to operate. We have issues about surveillance. We have issues about spying on journalists. Of course, you have issue of consistent or rather persistent attacks, clamp down on journalists, arbitrary arrests. These things happen over time, and it's not giving a good signal for press freedom. Well, it's a huge challenge. We believe that it has become highly imperative for stakeholders to come together and fashion out a best way out of this challenge, because we must have to begin to look for solutions. Because if we continue to operate like this, then we are going to continue to degenerate further from where we are at the moment.
Well, thank you for that. Let's bring it into the studio where we have with us Musikilu Mojeed. He's the president of the International Press Institute, otherwise known as IPI. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the news, Mr. Musikilu. Let me ask you about the theme for the year, something Mr. Isiguzo had mentioned in passing. Is the Nigerian media under siege digitally? How does the theme of this year resonate with Nigerian journalists, Nigerian media, in your own opinion?
I think when the organizers of this year's event were planning, it does appear they had Nigeria in mind. Because if you remember, sometime last year, a website was blocked in Nigeria permanently. And that website has not been reopened till date. That newspaper had to adopt a different, entirely new URL. So that's one. Now, if you look at the purchases, the expenditure of the Nigerian government for this year, you will see that billions of naira are being spent to buy surveillance equipment. Meaning that journalists are basically, the central point, the life wire of a journalist are his or her sources. Once government is able to know who you are talking to, who is talking to you, there is no way you can practice journalism anymore. In the past 10 years, the Nigerian government has invested heavily in the procurement of surveillance equipment. They are not slowing down. The government is not slowing down at all. If you look at the budget alone and look at the kind, even though they try to mask a lot of the purchases, but you will still see that there are a lot of surveillance equipment. And it cuts across all agencies, all security agencies, buying one security surveillance equipment or the other. So the Nigerian media is really under severe siege, meaning that you are not sure. And once this continues, sources will no longer talk to Nigerian journalists, knowing that when they talk to you, they can be exposed. Government will be aware. Government will know is giving out what information, yet there should be freedom of expression. Right. Journalism is important for the development of every society.
Well, Isiguzo, let me bring you in here. Well, the media has been described as the oxygen of democracy. Let's link it with this digital technology that seems to threaten or disrupt the ability of journalists to carry out their constitutional responsibility. How do you balance? What kind of balancing act needs to be done? How do you push back governments, not just this present government, governments down the line and going forward, on the need to appreciate the role of the media? How do you push back on attempts to actually muzzle the media, even through digital technology?
Well, one might say that, like the IPI president said, that in the last couple of years, the government has been procuring surveillance equipment in large quantities. But we are operating in a very peculiar environment. Today, we are plagued by insecurity across the country, in the northeast, in the northwest, north central, and some other parts of the country. You talk about terrorism, you talk about insurgency, you talk about banditry, you talk about the activities of secessionist groups. And that's why it has become necessary that government must have to devise a strategy of unmasking the people behind all this insecurity across the country. But it does appear that at the same time, instead of focusing on the major people, they are also diverting attention, to journalists, as the case may be. Now we have like the IPI president said also, we have the source protection right. The principle of source protection is unique in journalism practice. When the journalist no longer enjoys some level of privacy, then there is trouble, Now, beyond what the government is also doing, we're talking about digital siege. Today, somebody sits down in the comfort of his home. You are giving out information about you to somebody you don't know. You open a Facebook account, you are giving every detail about you. You are opening a Twitter account, you are giving details about you. In some cases, our people store information in the cloud. Somebody is operating the cloud. What it simply means that strange being can make or mar you. That becomes a huge challenge. We've got to open our eyes and be conscious of what we are actually doing. We are destroying ourselves. Yes, we have this digital equipment here and there. We've got to also adjust ourselves to fall in tune with the reality on ground. Now, secondly, you brought the issue of media being the oxygen of democracy. No doubt about it, we are the life wire. During the military era, you will not be talking about free press. Now, for democracy, for a working democracy, there must be a media that is strong, that is firm, that is courageous, and that is unencumbered. Once the journalist or media practice is put in a pigeonhole, democracy is imperiled. Like I said, how do we push back government? We will continue to interface, we will continue to increase engagement with government, with state actors, with the police, with the DSS, with the military. We must all come together to appreciate the fact that all of us have got a role to play. We are working together to build a climate that will be safe for all of us.
So, Mr. Musikilu, he talks about interference, conversation. Well, let's talk about the lack of punishment for crimes against journalists. How important is that? And do you think that, we need to start looking at that area? If there are no consequences for actions, don't they fester?
Well, if you talk about punishment against journalists, who are those committing atrocities against journalists? They are the people in power. They are people in authority. So if they are the people committing the atrocities, so who is going to punish, who will punish who? Right. So that's the point. That's why this conversation must continue. And that's why the IPA has been engaging the people in authority. I think generally in this country, I don't think that is the case elsewhere. People in authority see journalists as enemies. They do not even believe that we are working toward improving society. They think they love the country more than journalists do. And so we must continue this conversation. So the issue of punishment, it will not happen, except the people in power agree that impunity against journalists must end. For instance, if the police IG does not believe that journalists should be mistreated, I'm sure that when low-level officers commit atrocities against journalists, it will be quick to bring them to order. Right. The minister will be quick to bring whatever agency, the Minister of Information, will be quick to ask for the release of whatever journalist that is unduly detained and all of that.
Okay, we still have a little more time to discuss this. Well, like, Musikilu said, it is a continuing conversation. Let's even talk about the Freedom of Information Act. There was so much hue and cry about the need for the FOI, to be in place. It has been in place for, quite a number of years now, since 2011 or so that it was passed. How effective really has it been in helping the media, journalists, do their job effectively? Isiguzo.
Well, I've always said that the Freedom of Information Act is not necessarily a media act. It's not a media law. It's available to every Nigerian. Everybody can make use of that law. And as we speak, we still have a number of our colleagues or Nigerians that have taken advantage of that law. Yet, at the initial stage, it had a major challenge when a particular court, either in Akure or in Abeokuta, said that the law has got to be domesticated at the state level for it to be operational and all that. So we had that initial challenge. But I can tell you that a number of people have made use of it. Yes, if you look at it critically, there are also areas that seem to project the Official Secret Act. Because if you look at that law very closely, issues about security, issues about defense, internal security, and the rest of them, there are some no-go areas, so to speak, and that is why we feel that we need a full media law to be put in the Constitution. Because if you take time to look at our Constitution today, the only place that the media has been given a major role to play, is Section 22, Chapter 2. I think also Section 36. Section 22 talks about holding government accountable. And it reposed that responsibility in the media. And when you talk about holding government accountable, it simply means if you are going to have accountability in governance, if you are going to have transparency in governance, if you are going to have the sum total of good governance, that assignment has been given to the journalists, and this same journalist has got a barrage of difficulties, challenges, inhibiting him from fully exercising this responsibility. That's what we're facing here.
Okay. Unfortunately, that's all we have to leave the conversation. Journalists are not the enemy of the society. No. Thank you, gentlemen. Musikilu Mojeed is the President, International Press Institute, Nigeria, and of course, Chris Isiguzo, who is the President of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, NUJ. Thank you for being here.